It was supposed to be a routine morning at Graceland. No cameras, no guests, no crowds waiting outside the gates. Just another quiet day inside the most famous house in America. But when a housemaid opened a door she was never supposed to enter, she didn't find the king of rock and roll asleep in bed or surrounded by people. She found Elvis Presley sitting alone on the floor. No music playing, no television on, no sunglasses, no performance. Just Elvis, staring at the wall like he had forgotten where he was. What she saw in that room never made the newspapers. It never became a headline, and she never spoke about it publicly. But that moment revealed something about Elvis Presley that almost no one ever saw. Stay with us until the end, because this story isn't about fame, collapse, or scandal. It's about the quietest moment of Elvis's life, and the one that scared people the most. The morning light filtered gently through the long hallways of Graceland, landing softly on polished floors and framed photographs that had long stopped feeling like decoration. For the staff, it was just another day. Beds to make, rooms to air out, silence to respect. Mary had worked at Graceland long enough to know the rules, especially the unspoken ones. Certain doors were not to be opened unless you were asked. Certain rooms belonged not to the house, but to the man who lived inside it. That morning, Elvis's bedroom door was closed. That was unusual. Usually, by this hour, someone from his inner circle would have passed through already. Music would be playing, voices, movement. Today, there was nothing. Mary hesitated in the hallway, holding her cleaning cart. She told herself it wasn't her place to check. That privacy mattered. But something felt wrong. The house wasn't quiet. It was too quiet. She knocked once. No answer. "Elvis," she called softly, unsure she should even say his name. Still nothing. Her hand hovered over the doorknob longer than it should have. She could walk away. Pretend she never noticed. Instead, she turned it. The door opened slowly, silently. At first, she thought the room was empty. The bed was untouched. Curtains half-drawn. Morning light spilling across the carpet. Then she saw him. Elvis Presley was sitting on the floor beside the bed, his back against the mattress, legs bent loosely in front of him. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't crying. He was completely still. His eyes were open, fixed on a wall across from him, not focused, not wandering, just locked there, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. Mary froze. For a moment, she didn't breathe. "Elvis," she said again, barely louder than a whisper. He didn't react. No blink, no shift, no sign that he'd heard her at all. He wore the same clothes from the night before, wrinkled, unbuttoned at the collar. His hair was undone, falling naturally instead of styled. No rings, no stage presence. Just a man sitting on the floor of his own bedroom. Mary felt her stomach tighten. She took a step inside without meaning to. Her shoes made the softest sound against the carpet, enough that it should have caught his attention. It didn't. "Elvis, honey, are you all right?" she asked. That's when he finally moved. Not his head, not his body, just his eyes. They shifted slightly, not toward her, but downward, as if he'd suddenly remembered gravity existed. "I'm here," he said quietly. The words weren't reassuring. They sounded surprised. Mary swallowed hard. She had seen Elvis surrounded by hundreds of people, laughing, commanding rooms, larger than life. She had never seen him like this, sitting on the floor, alone, present, but not fully there. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said quickly. It's all right," Elvis interrupted gently. He looked up at her then, and the look in his eyes made her heart sink. It wasn't sadness. It was absence, like something inside him had gone quiet, and he didn't know how to turn it back on. "I didn't sleep," he added, almost to himself. Mary nodded, unsure what to say. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but heavy. And as Mary stood there, holding a cleaning rag in a room that suddenly felt far too small for the weight it carried, she realized something unsettling. This wasn't exhaustion. This wasn't a bad night. This was a man sitting with something he had avoided for a very long time, and she had walked in right as it surfaced. Mary set her cleaning cart down slowly, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile calm holding the room together. She had worked in houses like this before, big, beautiful places filled with expensive furniture and unspoken rules. She had learned long ago that when you worked quietly enough, you became invisible. But standing there now, she didn't feel invisible at all. She felt like a witness. "Elvis," she said carefully, keeping her voice low, "do you want to call someone?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at his hands resting loosely on his knees. They were still, too still, like they belonged to someone else. "I don't know how long I've been sitting here," he said finally. Mary's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" she asked. He shrugged faintly. "Feels like hours. Feels like minutes. I can't tell the difference anymore." She stepped closer, stopping a few feet away, close enough to show concern, far enough to respect whatever invisible boundary he was holding on to. "Did you eat anything this morning?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "Sleep?" Another shake. Mary hesitated, then asked a question that had been forming in her mind since she opened the door. "Did something happen last night?" Elvis leaned his head back against the bed and stared at the ceiling. "Not exactly," he said. "That's what's both there in me." He let out a breath that sounded more like surrender than relief. "Everybody expects something big," he continued. "A fight, a breakdown, a reason." Mary listened without interrupting. "But sometimes," Elvis said quietly, "nothing happens, and that's worse." She frowned slightly. "Why?" "Because when there ain't no noise," he replied, "you start hearing things you've been drowning out." The room felt colder suddenly. Mary glanced at the window, at the morning light, trying its best to make everything look normal. "What kind of things?" she asked. Elvis closed his eyes. "The kind that ask questions," he said, "and don't like the answers." She swallowed. She had no training for this. No script. No rule book. She wasn't a doctor or a friend or family. She was just someone who had walked into a room at the wrong, or maybe right, moment. "You don't look sick," she said softly. "You look tired." He smiled faintly at that. "That's what everyone says." "But this is different," Mary continued, surprised at herself at her own confidence. "This kind of tired don't go away with sleep." Elvis opened his eyes and looked at her again. This time, he really looked. "You ever wake up one day," he asked, "and realize you don't recognize the life you built?" Mary thought her own mornings. The same routine. The same rooms. The same quiet sacrifices no one ever noticed. "Yes," she said honestly. "I have." That seemed to ground him. He shifted slightly, pulling one knee closer to his chest like a child might. "I keep thinking if I just push through," Elvis said, "it'll come back. The feeling. The reason. And does it?" Mary asked. He shook his head. "It just gets quieter." Silence settled between them again, not awkward, not rushed. Then Elvis said something that made her breath catch. "I'm scared I don't miss it," he admitted. "The noise. The crowds. I'm scared that part of me is already gone." Mary's instinct was to reassure him, to say the right thing, to lift him up. But something told her that wasn't what he needed. "Maybe that part's just resting," she said instead. "And you finally gave it space." Elvis considered that. "You think so?" "I do," she said. "And I think it don't make you less of who you are." He nodded slowly. "I didn't plan for anyone to see me like this," he said. Mary met his eyes. "Then maybe you weren't meant to be alone with it." He let out a long breath, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. "Could you do me a favor?" he asked. "Of course," she replied. "Don't tell anyone you found me like this," he said. "Not today." Mary nodded immediately. "I won't." He looked relieved, not because of secrecy, but because someone had listened without trying to fix him. As she turned to leave, Elvis spoke again. "Mary," she paused. "Thank you," he said, "for knocking, even if you shouldn't have." She gave a small smile. Sometimes the rules get it wrong. When she closed the door behind her, Mary leaned against the hallway wall for a moment, steadying herself. Inside the room, Elvis remained seated on the floor, but something had shifted. He was still quiet, still lost, but no longer completely alone. Mary didn't tell anyone what she had seen. She finished her work quietly, moving to the house like she always did, but Graceland felt different now. The walls felt thinner, the air heavier, as if the house itself knew something had surfaced that couldn't be pushed back down easily. Elvis stayed in his room. That alone was enough to raise concern. By mid-morning, someone noticed. It was subtle at first. A pause in the hallway, a glance at a closed door that should have been open by now. A whispered question passed between staff members. Elvis was usually up, usually moving, usually surrounded. Today, nothing. Charlie was the first from the inner circle to knock. "Elvis?" he called, louder than Mary had dared. "You awake?" No answer. Charlie frowned and knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. He opened the door without waiting. The sight stopped him cold. Elvis was no longer sitting on the floor. He was on the bed now, leaning back against the headboard, eyes open, staring at the far wall. The room looked untouched, like time had paused and refused to restart. "Elvis," Charlie said carefully, stepping inside. "You all right, buddy?" Elvis turned his head slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I think so." Charlie didn't believe him. "You missed breakfast," he said. "Try and keep it light. And lunch is going to be wondering where you went next." Elvis didn't smile. Charlie sat on the edge of the bed, studying him. He'd seen Elvis exhausted, angry, overstimulated, even broken after long nights. This was different. "You sick?" Charlie asked. Elvis shook his head. "Something happened last night?" Charlie pressed. Elvis hesitated. He thought of Mary standing in the doorway, the way she hadn't rushed him, the way she hadn't tried to turn him back into something he wasn't ready to be. "No," Elvis said finally. "That's the problem." Charlie's jaw tightened. That don't make sense." "It does," Elvis replied quietly. "Just not the kind you can fix." Charlie exhaled slowly. "You got meetings today. Calls. Plans. People expecting—" "I know," Elvis interrupted. His voice wasn't sharp, just tired. "That's what I'm talking about." Charlie leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You scare folks when you go quiet like this." Elvis looked at him then. Really looked. "That's 'cause they only know me when I'm loud," he said. Charlie had no answer for that. Not long after Charlie left, the quiet turned into tension. Doors opened and closed more often. Voices gathered in corners. Someone made a phone call that wasn't supposed to happen yet. And then the worst person noticed. Colonel Parker arrived unannounced. He didn't knock. He entered Elvis's room with practiced confidence, filling the space with his presence before saying a word. "Well," Parker said cheerfully, clapping his hands once. "There you are." Elvis didn't move. Parker took in the scene quickly. The untouched room, the stillness, the man not playing his part. "This won't do," Parker said, his tone shifting. "You've got obligations." Elvis stared ahead. "I ain't going anywhere today." Parker laughed lightly. "Of course you are." "No," Elvis said, finally turning his head. "I'm not." The smile slipped. "What's this about?" Parker asked. "You tired? We can fix tired." Elvis shook his head. "You always think you can." Parker's eyes narrowed. "Don't start this." "I already did," Elvis replied. The room felt tight now. "You don't get to disappear," Parker said firmly. "Not like this. People depend on you." Elvis thought of the morning silence, the absence, the strange peace he hadn't felt in years. "I'm still here," he said. "I just ain't performing today." Parker leaned in closer, voice low and dangerous. "You stop and everything stops." Elvis met his gaze. "Then maybe it needs to." For the first time, Parker looked unsure. Not angry, not loud, uncertain. And Elvis realized something in that moment. His silence frightened them more than any outburst ever could, because they didn't know how to control it. Colonel Parker didn't raise his voice. That was how Elvis knew the pressure was real. When Parker shouted, it was theater. When he went quiet, it meant consequences were being weighed somewhere behind his eyes. Contracts, appearances, money already promised. You don't feel like performing today, Parker said calmly, straightening his jacket. Fine. We reschedule. We explain. But this mood, he gestured vaguely around the room. This absence, that can't continue. Elvis shifted slightly on the bed, the movement slow and deliberate. You want me loud again, Elvis said, smiling, shaking hands. Parker smiled thinly. That's who you are. Elvis shook his head. That's who I learned to be. The words landed heavier than he expected. Charlie, standing near the door, stiffened. He felt it too, that this conversation was crossing into territory they usually avoided. Parker exhaled, impatient now. Listen to me, son. People don't pay to see doubt. They pay to see confidence. Energy. The king. Elvis looked down at his hands again. I don't feel like the king today, he said. That doesn't matter, Parker snapped. Feelings pass. Image stays. Something in Elvis hardened. You ever think maybe that's a problem? He asked quietly. That the image never sleeps? Parker scoffed. You think regular people get to stop? They don't. Neither do you. Elvis stood up. Not suddenly. Not angrily. He stood like someone testing his balance after sitting too long. I woke up this morning and realized something, Elvis said. If I disappear for one day, y'all panic. But if I disappear inside myself a little every day, nobody notices. The room went still. Charlie felt a chill run up his spine. Parker's eyes darkened. You're talking nonsense. No, Elvis replied. I'm talking truth. He walked slowly across the room, stopping in front of the mirror. His reflection looked unfamiliar again, not broken, not glamorous, just real. I don't know what this is yet, Elvis said, gesturing vaguely at his chest. But I know I can't keep drowning out. Parker stepped closer. You walk away now, people start asking questions. Elvis turned. Let them. You'll scare fans. Then maybe they'll see I'm human. Parker laughed once, sharp and humorless. Human doesn't sell. Elvis met his gaze. I ain't for sale today. The words echoed. Charlie's breath caught. He had never heard Elvis say that out loud. Parker stared at him for a long moment, calculating. Then his tone shifted, softer, almost fatherly. Elvis, you're confused, he said. You need structure, direction. You need to get back into rhythm. Elvis thought of Mary, standing quietly in the doorway, the way she hadn't demanded anything from him, the way silence had finally felt safe. I need space, Elvis said. Just a little. Parker's jaw tightened. You don't get space in this business. Elvis stepped back from the mirror. Then maybe I don't want this business today. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Charlie took a small step forward. Colonel, maybe we give him the day. Parker shot him a warning look, then turned back to Elvis. This is a mistake, he said coldly. Elvis nodded. Maybe, but it's mine. For a long second, no one moved. Then Parker turned sharply and walked out without another word. The door closed harder than necessary. Silence followed. Charlie looked at Elvis, eyes wide. You okay? Elvis let out a shaky breath. I don't know, he admitted, but I know I didn't lie. Charlie nodded slowly. That counts for something. Elvis sat back down on the bed, suddenly exhausted, not from fighting, but from finally standing still. For the first time, he hadn't performed his way out of discomfort. He'd stayed in it, and that scared him, almost as much as it relieved him. The consequences didn't arrive with headlines or flashing cameras. They arrived quietly. By early afternoon, Graceland felt unsettled in a way Elvis had never sensed before. Not chaotic, uncertain. People moved the halls more slowly, voices lower, as if everyone were waiting for instructions that never came. Elvis stayed in his room. That alone disrupted everything. Someone postponed a phone call. Someone else canceled a visit. A schedule quietly unraveled without explanation. The machine that usually ran on his presence hesitated, unsure how to function without it. Elvis noticed, not with satisfaction, with surprise. He had always believed that if he stopped, everything would collapse. That chaos would follow. That anger would erupt. Instead, what followed was discomfort. And discomfort, he realized, was something people didn't know how to handle. He sat near the window now, watching the light change across the lawn. The quiet pressed in, but it no longer felt threatening. It felt like something new learning how to exist. A soft knock came at the door. Not Charlie this time. It was his father. Vernon stood awkwardly in the doorway, hat in his hands, eyes searching Elvis's face like he was trying to find the boy he remembered. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. Elvis nodded. Vernon stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He didn't sit right away. "You all right, son?" he asked. Elvis considered the question carefully. "I don't know," he said, "but I think I'm doing the right thing." Vernon nodded slowly. "People are talking." Elvis smiled faintly. "They always are." "That's not what I mean," Vernon said gently. "They're worried. Not about the work. About you." That caught Elvis off guard. "Since when?" he asked. Vernon hesitated. "Since you didn't come downstairs." The simplicity of it stunned him. Not a performance missed. Not a deal delayed. Just absence. Vernon finally sat on the edge of the chair. "I raised you to keep going," he said quietly. "To work hard. To not complain. Maybe I pushed that too far." Elvis felt a tightness in his throat. "You did what you thought was right," Elvis said. Vernon nodded. "But that don't mean it didn't cost you." They sat in silence for a moment. "I saw your door close this morning," Vernon continued. "And for the first time, I didn't knock. I figured if you closed it, you needed it closed." Elvis looked up at him. "Thank you," he said softly. Vernon stood after a moment. "I ain't here to tell you what to do," he said. "Just don't disappear from yourself, all right?" Elvis nodded. After his father left, Elvis stayed where he was, replaying conversation. He felt something loosen inside him, not resolution, but permission. Later, Charlie returned. "You okay?" he asked. Elvis smiled slightly. "I think I'm starting to be." Charlie exhaled in relief. "Good, 'cause people don't know what to do when you go quiet like this." Elvis looked around the room, the stillness, the lack of demand. "Neither do I," he admitted, "but I'm learning." As evening approached, the house began to settle again, not back into its old rhythm, into a slower one. Elvis lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, he wasn't bracing for the next demand. He wasn't preparing. He was waiting. And he realized something important. The world didn't fall apart when he stopped. It just adjusted. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and Graceland settled into its nighttime quiet, Elvis finally stood up and left his room. Not to perform, not to meet anyone, just to walk. The house felt different now, not empty, but respectful, like it had learned how to lower its voice. Elvis moved slowly through the halls, barefoot, listening to the soft sound of the place he had filled with noise for so long. Near the end of the corridor, he saw Mary again. She was standing by her cart, folding a cloth with careful hands. When she noticed him, she froze, unsure she should speak or disappear. "Elvis," she said softly. He smiled, a real one this time. "Mary." They stood there for a moment, the memory of that morning hanging between them. "I just wanted to say," Elvis began, then paused. He wasn't used to choosing words without an audience. "I appreciate you not making a big deal out of things earlier." Mary nodded. "You didn't need a big deal." "No," he agreed. "I needed someone to see me without expecting anything back." Her eyes softened. "I didn't see the king this morning," she said. "I saw a man who needed the room to be quiet." Elvis felt a tightness in his chest. Not pain, not fear, recognition. "That's what scared everyone else," he said quietly. "The quiet." Mary gave a small smile. "Sometimes quiet is just honesty without decoration." Elvis nodded slowly. He realized then what that moment on the floor had been. Not a breakdown, not weakness, not failure. It had been the first time he allowed himself to stop performing even when no one was watching. Mary stepped aside to let him pass, then hesitated. "You all right now?" she asked. Elvis thought about the day, the pressure, the silence, his father's words, the way the house had adapted instead of collapsing. "I don't have answers yet," he said. "But I don't feel lost anymore." She nodded, satisfied. That night, Elvis returned to his room and sat on the edge of the bed, not on the floor. The room felt larger now, lighter. He understood what Mary had seen that morning. She hadn't seen a man falling apart. She had seen a man pausing at the edge of something new. Elvis lay back and closed his eyes, not to escape, but to stay. And though the world would never know about the quiet morning, when the king sat on the floor of his own bedroom, Elvis Presley carried it with him, as proof that even legends are allowed moments of stillness, moments where nothing is demanded, moments where silence doesn't mean absence, moments where being human is finally enough.